Avery Morgan never imagined she would wake at 3 in the morning to police officers pounding on her door, informing her that her teenage brother had destroyed a $200,000 car during an illegal street race. Even less than 6 weeks later, she would stand before a judge marrying the car's owner, Daniel Foster, the most arrogant, controlling, and irritatingly handsome billionaire she had ever encountered. A marriage for honor, they said. An agreement to protect reputations. But nobody warned Avery that agreements on paper cannot prevent hearts from beating off rhythm. And nobody warned Daniel that stubborn, adorable women like Avery have the gift of turning empires upside down. The September dawn was freezing when Avery Morgan was jolted awake by the sound of sirens on the street. Still groggy, barefoot and wearing pink flannel pajamas with kitten prints, she opened the door to find 2 police officers, a patrol car flashing blue and red lights like some kind of rave party, and the absolute certainty that something very, very bad had happened. "Are you the sister of Carter Morgan?" Avery's heart plummeted straight to her stomach. Carter. Of course it was Carter. Her 17-year-old brother, adrenaline junkie, impulsive as a ticking time bomb and stubborn as a mule digging in its heels. She knew his fascination with cars, speed, and living on the edge, as he dramatically put it, would cause problems. But never in her 26 years of life did she imagine it would cause a problem this big. "Is he okay?" was the first thing she managed to ask, her voice coming out hoarse with fear. "He is. But you need to come with us to the station." 2 hours later, Avery was sitting in a stuffy room at Oklahoma City Police Department, listening to a detective explain, with the patience of someone who has repeated the same speech for years, that her brother had participated in an illegal street race in the industrial district of the city. Carter, losing control of a friend's borrowed car that was equally reckless, collided with a parked vehicle. Not just any vehicle. A black Mercedes AMG GT, imported, valued at over $1 million, destroyed, completely destroyed, and the owner, Daniel Foster. Avery felt the world spin. She knew that name. Everyone in Oklahoma City knew it. The Fosters were practically oil and agriculture royalty in Oklahoma, owners of the state's largest agricultural export company, involved in politics, regulars in the society pages. The family patriarch, Alexander Foster, was a United States senator, and his son, Daniel, was the relentless CEO who had transformed the family business into a billion-dollar empire. "My God," Avery murmured, running her trembling hands over her face. How much will it cost to fix?" The detective hesitated. "According to the preliminary assessment, the car is a total loss, plus damages to the property wall where it was parked. We're talking about a sum that could exceed $1.5 million. Avery thought she was going to throw up. $1.5 million. They didn't even have $15,000 in the bank. Her mother, Linda, worked as a nurse in double shifts to keep the household running. She herself was finishing her accounting degree while interning at an agricultural cooperative, earning a salary that barely covered the electric and internet bills. "And there's more," the detective continued, clearly uncomfortable. "The Foster family attorney has already been in contact. They want a meeting. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning. When Avery returned home, it was already 5 in the morning. Carter was sitting in the living room, pale, with red eyes. Linda was crying softly in the kitchen, making coffee as if that would solve anything. And Grandma Rose, Avery's grandmother, was seated in the patterned armchair with her arms crossed and an expression that mixed fury and worry. "Foolish boy," the grandmother grumbled, pointing her finger at Carter. "I warned you that this obsession with speed would end badly. But no, you had to be the smart one. Grandma, I'm sorry, sorry doesn't pay for a millionaire's car, boy." Avery sighed, taking off her coat and collapsing onto the sofa next to her brother. "Carter, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking, Ave. It all happened so fast. Leo said it would be fine, just one lap, and you believed him?" Avery turned to him, her voice rising. "You're 17 years old, Carter. 17. You shouldn't even be driving alone, much less participating in an illegal race. Tears streamed down the boy's face. I ruined everything, didn't I? Avery wanted to scream, curse, say yes. He had ruined everything. But looking at her younger brother, this boy she had practically helped raise after their father died, she felt only a deep exhaustion and a fear that squeezed her chest like a vice. Well, figure it out, she said, not knowing how. Somehow we always figure it out. But the next morning, when Avery entered the most elegant law office she had ever set foot in, wearing her only dress pants and a white blouse borrowed from her best friend Chloe, she realized this time would be different. The conference room was all glass, with a panoramic view of Oklahoma City that looked like something out of an architecture magazine. There was a huge mahogany table, leather chairs, and an intimidating silence that made each of her steps echo like a war drum. And then he entered. Daniel Foster was even more imposing in person than in the society page photos. Tall, broad shoulders under a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than the Morgan family car. Black hair slightly tousled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. Square jaw, dark eyes that seemed capable of seeing through any lie, and an expression that made it clear he was not there to make friends. "Miss Morgan," he greeted, his voice deep and controlled. He didn't even extend his hand. "Mr. Foster," Avery responded, forcing herself to maintain composure. They sat on opposite sides of the table, like generals in a peace negotiation doomed to failure. The Foster family attorney, a middle-aged man with prescription glasses and a leather briefcase, began talking about damages, lawsuits, civil liabilities. Avery could barely hear. Her eyes were fixed on Daniel, who watched her with an intensity that made her feel naked, exposed, judged. He didn't blink, didn't look away, just analyzed her as if she were a defective part on a production line. "Do you understand the gravity of the situation?" Daniel asked, interrupting the lawyer. "Your brother destroyed an invaluable asset, participated in criminal activity, and on top of that, the location where this happened is at the center of an investigation into irregularities in public works contracts linked to my family." Avery frowned. "What?" "The industrial area where your brother decided to play race car driver was under investigation for alleged favoritism in contract bids. If this leaks to the press associated with the accident, the political opposition will use it as ammunition against my father, against my company, against everything we have built. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know." His voice was cutting. "But now you do. And now, Miss Morgan, we need to find a solution that protects both parties." That's when the lawyer slid a document across the table. Avery picked it up with trembling hands, her eyes running over the legalese she barely understood. But some phrases jumped off the page like punches. Marriage contract, common law union, public image, 2-year term. She looked up astonished. You're serious?" Daniel leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "Completely. A marriage solves everything. Transforms the accident into an unusual meeting story. Protects your family from a lawsuit that would destroy them financially, and protects my family from a political scandal. But this is insane." Avery stood up, the chair scraping loudly on the floor. "You can't just buy a marriage." "I'm not buying," Daniel said, his voice dangerously calm. "I'm proposing an agreement. You marry me, we maintain appearances for 2 years, and then we go our separate ways. During this period, your family is protected, your brother doesn't go to jail, and your mother doesn't lose the house." The words hit Avery like stones. He was right. Damn him, he was right. Without money to pay for damages, without being able to afford lawyers, her family would be destroyed. Carter could be prosecuted as an adult, depending on how the district attorney decided to frame the case. And the house where they lived, still with payments remaining, would be taken. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice coming out weaker than she would have liked. Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Then we'll see each other in court, and I can guarantee, Miss Morgan, that my lawyers are very, very good." Avery felt hot tears prick her eyes, but she blinked furiously to hold them back. She wouldn't cry. Not in front of him. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. How long do I have to decide? 48 hours. She nodded, taking the document and turning to leave. But before reaching the door, his voice stopped her. "Miss Morgan." Avery turned around. Daniel's eyes were fixed on her, and for the first time there was something beyond coldness there, something she couldn't decipher. Exhaustion, perhaps, or resignation. Just so we're clear, I don't want this any more than you do. But sometimes we don't have a choice. Avery pressed the document against her chest. "We all have choices, Mr. Foster. Some are just worse than others." And she left, leaving behind the smell of fine wood, expensive coffee, and the weight of a decision that would change her life forever. 48 hours later, Avery was back in that glass room, signing a marriage contract that felt more like a pact with the devil. Chloe, her best friend and newly graduated lawyer, was at her side, reviewing each clause with the meticulousness of someone searching for landmines on a battlefield. "There's a clause here about mandatory public appearances," Chloe murmured, pointing to the document. "Political dinners, social events, grand openings. You're going to have to do a real make-believe tour." "I know," Avery sighed, "and another about shared housing. You'll have to live together, at least 3 days a week. I know that too." Chloe turned to her, brown eyes full of concern. "Av, you don't have to do this." "Well, find another way. I can—" "You can what, Chloe?" "Pay $1.5 million. Get my mother off the list for the lawsuit that's going to take our house." Avery shook her head, her voice tired. "There's no other way. And you know it." On the other side of the table, Daniel was signing his copy of the contract, with the same expression he probably used to close million-dollar deals. Cold, focused, distant. He didn't even look at her during the entire process. It was as if he were signing a land purchase deed, not a marriage contract. "Done?" said the lawyer, collecting the documents. "The civil ceremony is scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. at the courthouse. Small ceremony, only necessary witnesses. The press office has already prepared an official statement that will be released after registration." Avery swallowed hard. Friday, 3 days away. 3 days to process that she was about to marry a stranger. "There's one more thing," Daniel said, finally looking at her. "You'll need an appropriate dress for the ceremony, and suitable clothes for the events to come. My assistant will schedule a shopping session." "I have clothes," Avery shot back, raising her chin. "I'm sure you do, but not for the places where we'll appear together." The arrogance in his voice made Avery's blood boil. "Are you calling me poor, Mr. Foster? I'm being practical, Miss Morgan. You'll be attending environments where the wrong outfit can be commented on more than the news itself, and we can't give reasons for people to question our union." Chloe placed her hand on Avery's arm, a silent gesture of let it go. But Avery was boiling inside. How dare he? How dare this presumptuous man reduce everything to money, appearances and contracts? "Fine," she said, forcing a smile as fake as all that theatre. "I'll buy the clothes, I'll wear the pretty dresses, I'll smile in the photos. But don't confuse contractual obligation with obedience, Mr. Foster. I'm not your employee." For the first time, something like surprise crossed his face. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were re-evaluating who he had in front of him. "I wouldn't expect any less." The shopping session 2 days later was one of the most surreal experiences of Avery's life. Daniel's assistant, a woman in her early 40s named Paula, extremely polite, but with an air of someone who has seen everything, took her to a boutique in downtown Oklahoma City that Avery only knew from walking past and looking at the windows with that certainty she would never enter there. "We need 3 complete looks," Paula explained while a saleswoman served champagne that Avery hadn't asked for. "One for the civil wedding, one for the introduction dinner at Foster Ranch, and one for next month's charity event." Avery tried on dresses that cost more than her 6-month salary. She felt the fine fabric sliding over her skin, the perfect fit of custom-made seams, the weight of Italian shoes that felt like clouds on her feet. It was beautiful, it was tempting, but it was also a fantasy, a character costume she would have to play. And lingerie? The saleswoman asked naturally. Avery almost spit out the champagne. Lingerie. It's part of the trousseau, dear. Mrs. Foster expects the bride to be adequately prepared. Mrs. Foster can... Avery bit her tongue. She wouldn't explode there in front of strangers. She wouldn't give that spectacle. It won't be necessary. It's an arranged marriage. There's no honeymoon. There's no romance. Paula and the saleswoman exchanged a look that Avery couldn't decipher. Pity? Amusement? Both? Even so, Paula insisted gently, it's better to be prepared. Public appearances may require physical proximity, and the Foster family is quite traditional in certain matters. Avery ended up agreeing, more out of exhaustion than conviction. When she finally left the boutique, carrying bags she never imagined owning, she felt strangely empty, as if she were selling pieces of herself in exchange for silk and satin. Friday arrived too quickly. Avery woke up with Pepper, her little mutt dog, licking her face insistently, as if she knew something big was about to happen. Linda prepared a special breakfast: toast, cornbread, freshly squeezed orange juice. But nobody ate properly. Everyone just pushed food around their plates, heavy silence hanging over the table. "You don't have to do this, honey," Linda said for the 10th time. "I have to, Mom, and it'll be okay." Grandma Rose, at her 78 years and sharp tongue, huffed. "Marrying a man you barely know. In my day, they called that insanity." "In your day, there were arranged marriages too, Grandma," Avery retorted, trying to inject some humor into the situation. "Yes, but at least we had time to know the guy first. You're going to marry this Daniel guy and don't even know if he snores, if he roots for a rival team, if he puts ketchup on pizza." Despite everything, Avery laughed. "If he puts ketchup on pizza, I'm filing for divorce immediately." The courthouse was small, elegant, and terribly formal. There were only the mandatory witnesses, the Foster family lawyer, Paula, and Mason Wright, Daniel's best friend whom Avery met right there, 5 minutes before the ceremony. Mason was chief agronomist at Foster Ranch, had an easy smile and eyes that sparkled with mischief when he shook Avery's hand. "So you're the brave one," he said, low enough for only her to hear. "Or the crazy one," Avery murmured. "In my experience, the two things usually go together." Daniel arrived punctually at 3 p.m., wearing a navy blue suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and military posture. He greeted everyone with brief, professional nods, and when his eyes finally met Avery's, she couldn't read anything there, neither regret nor satisfaction, just resignation. The ceremony lasted 15 minutes. The judge read the articles, asked the usual questions, and they signed the papers. When it came time for "You May Kiss the Bride," there was an awkward silence. Daniel looked at Avery, she looked at him, and then, with the stiffness of someone fulfilling protocol, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. It was a quick, chaste kiss, without any emotion. But still, Avery felt a strange spark run down her spine. The scent of his cologne, woody and masculine. The firmness of the hand he briefly placed on her waist. The brief brush of soft lips against hers. And then it was over, and they were officially husband and wife. "Congratulations," Mason said, winking at Avery. "Welcome to the Chaos Clan." Avery didn't know if that was a warning or a joke. Foster Ranch was, in a word, imposing. Located in the rural area near Guthrie, an hour from Oklahoma City, the property stretched for acres of cultivated land, green pastures, and a ranch house that looked like something out of a home decor magazine. 3 stories, wide porches, colonial windows, and a garden so well maintained it made Avery feel guilty about stepping on the grass. "Welcome," Daniel said when the car stopped in front of the main entrance. There was no warmth in his voice, just formality. Avery got out of the vehicle, holding her purse strap like it was a life preserver. Inside, a woman of about 60, elegantly dressed with blonde hair pulled into an impeccable bun, waited at the door. Helen Foster, the matriarch, Daniel's mother. "Daniel," she greeted, kissing her son's cheek with the coldness of greeting a distant acquaintance. Then her icy blue eyes landed on Avery. "And you must be..." "Avery," The pause before the name was so deliberate it was almost offensive. "Mrs. Foster," Avery said, extending her hand. Helen looked at the extended hand as if it were something curious, vaguely interesting but not worthy of touch. Then, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she briefly shook it. "Welcome to the family. I hope you adapt quickly, thank you. I'll show you to your quarters. I imagine you'll want to settle in before dinner." Quarters. Avery almost laughed. Where she lived, they called it a bedroom. But she followed Helen upstairs, Daniel behind them in sepulchral silence, until they reached the second floor. The hallway was wide, decorated with old family photographs, oil paintings, and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than a compact car. Helen stopped in front of a dark wood double door. "This will be your room." Avery blinked. "My room? Isn't it ours?" A thin smile appeared on Helen's lips. "Dear, this is a marriage of convenience, isn't it? There's no need to pretend intimacy inside the house. Only in public." Daniel walked past them, opening the door to the adjacent room. "He'll be here. If you need anything, just knock." And he entered, closing the door behind him without even looking back. Avery stood there in the hallway, feeling like an idiot. Helen gave her a condescending pat on the shoulder. "Dinner is at 8. Dress appropriately." And she disappeared down the hallway, leaving Avery alone with little Pepper, whom she had insisted on bringing, and the growing feeling that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The room, she had to admit, was beautiful. King-size bed with beige linen sheets, solid wood furniture, a walk-in closet that was bigger than her old house's living room, and a large window with a view of the stables and fields in the background. There was even a private bathroom with a soaking tub and a rainfall shower. But it was cold, impersonal, like a very expensive hotel room you could never afford. Avery sat on the edge of the bed, Pepper jumping up beside her and curling up against her legs. "What did I do, Pepper? What did I do?" The little dog tilted her head, ears drooping, as if she too were wondering the same thing. The introduction dinner was, without a shadow of doubt, the most embarrassing experience of Avery's life. The dining room easily accommodated 20 people, with a varnished wood table that reflected the chandelier light like a mirror. There were more utensils around the plate than Avery used in an entire week. And all the Fosters were there, sitting like judges at a trial, analyzing her every move. Alexander Foster, the patriarch, occupied the head of the table. Senator magnate, man who probably didn't know the word no. He observed Avery with calculating eyes, as if evaluating a dubious investment. "So, Avery," he began, his voice carrying that paternal tone politicians love to use, "Daniel told me about the circumstances of your marriage. Quite unusual, isn't it?" "Yes, sir," Avery replied, keeping her voice firm, "but sometimes life surprises us." "Indeed." Alexander took a sip of wine. "And tell me, what do you do? Professionally, I mean." "I'm an accounting intern at an agricultural cooperative, and am finishing my degree." "How admirable," Helen said, but the tone made it clear she found it anything but admirable. An independent woman, modern. Blair, Daniel's sister, rolled her eyes so obviously that even people in the kitchen must have seen. She was sitting across from Avery, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Avery's entire accounting course, and didn't hide her contempt. "So you work with numbers," Blair said, examining her perfectly red manicured nails. "How cute. Must be comforting to deal with such small things." Avery gripped her fork harder than necessary. "Actually, it's quite complex. Managing resources for small cooperatives requires a lot of creativity and planning. It's not like managing million-dollar companies that have accountants for everything." Blair raised an eyebrow. "Touché." Daniel, sitting next to Avery, remained silent during the entire exchange. Didn't defend, didn't intervene, just cut his steak with surgical precision, as if none of it affected him. The only ally Avery found at that table was Grandma Catherine, Daniel's grandmother, an 84-year-old lady, white hair pulled into a low bun, and brown eyes full of life. "Leave the girl alone," Grandma Catherine said, pointing her fork at her grandchildren. "She just arrived, and you're already with this ridiculous interrogation. Avery, dear, don't mind them. They're all love-starved." "Grandma," Blair protested. "Don't grandma me, girl. It's the truth." Grandma Catherine turned to Avery with a warm smile. "Do you like horses?" I've never ridden one." "Excellent. Tomorrow Daniel will take you to see the stables. He loves horses. It's practically the only thing that takes that funeral face off him." Daniel finally reacted, shooting a warning look at his grandmother. But Grandma Catherine just laughed, returning to her salad as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb at dinner. Later, after everyone had retired and Avery could finally escape to her room, she threw herself on the bed, still dressed, staring at the ceiling as if the answers she was looking for were written there. Then she heard knocking at the door. "Come in," she said without moving. Daniel appeared in the doorway, still in dress pants and shirt, but with sleeves rolled up to his elbows and an expression tired, very tired. "I came to apologize," he said, closing the door behind him. Avery sat up, surprised. "Apologize? For my family? They can be difficult." Difficult is a generous euphemism. An almost smile passed over his lips. "Almost. I know this isn't easy for you. It's not easy for any of us. But if we're going to make this work, we need to have some kind of understanding." "Understanding," Avery repeated, crossing her arms. "And what kind of understanding do you suggest?" Daniel took a few steps into the room, hands in his pockets. "At public events, we're a couple. We show affection, closeness, whatever is necessary. Here, inside the house, we're situation companions. We respect each other's space. Don't interfere in personal lives. Don't create expectations." "Sounds very romantic," Avery said ironically. "It's not meant to be romantic. It's meant to be bearable." They stood there, looking at each other across the room, lit only by the dim light of the bedside lamp. And for the first time, Avery noticed something in his eyes, a hidden sadness, an invisible prison. Daniel Foster, the arrogant, controlling billionaire, was also trapped in that agreement. He was also sacrificing something. "Why did you agree to this?" she suddenly asked. "You have money, power. You could have solved it another way. Why did you accept an arranged marriage?" Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Because sometimes the price of saying no is too high, even for me." And before she could ask what he meant, he turned and left, closing the door with a soft click. Avery stayed there in the dark, with more questions than answers, and the certainty that the next 2 years would be much more complicated than any contract could predict. The first week at Foster Ranch was, in summary, a Cold War disguised as civilized coexistence. Avery woke early, tried to help in the kitchen, and was gently but firmly expelled by the cooks, who insisted that Mom doesn't need to do that. She tried to talk to Helen and received monosyllabic responses wrapped in glacial smiles. And Daniel was a ghost. He left before breakfast, returned after dinner, and when they were in the same room, they barely exchanged 2 words beyond good morning and good night. But everything changed on a sunny Saturday morning when Grandma Catherine appeared in Avery's room, carrying riding boots, jeans, and a long-sleeved shirt. "Get up, girl. Today you're going to meet Maverick." "Who?" Avery asked, still sleepy. "My grandson's horse. And if there's anything that pulls that boy out of his pit of bitterness, it's that animal." Half an hour later, Avery was at the stables, wearing borrowed clothes that were slightly large but served the purpose. The place smelled of hay, leather, and damp earth, a surprisingly comforting smell. And there in the last stall was a chestnut mixed breed horse, with a white star on his forehead, watching her with intelligent, curious eyes. "This is Maverick," Daniel's voice said behind her. Avery turned, finding him leaning against the stable door, wearing faded jeans, worn boots, and a plaid shirt with rolled-up sleeves. It was the first time she had seen him without a suit, and heavens, he was different, more human, more accessible, almost attractive. "He's beautiful," Avery said, turning back to the horse. "He's stubborn, proud, and doesn't like strangers." Daniel walked up to her, picking up a carrot from a nearby bucket and holding it out, exactly like his owner. For the first time, Avery laughed, a genuine laugh, and she saw something rare happen. Daniel smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but real. "Want to feed him?" he asked. "I don't know how—" "Put the carrot in the palm of your hand like this and keep your fingers together. He won't hurt you." Avery did as instructed, extending her trembling hand. Maverick sniffed, snorted, and then gently took the carrot, chewing with satisfaction. Avery felt the warm touch of the animal's muzzle and couldn't help but smile. "He liked you," Daniel observed, surprised. "That's rare. Maybe I have a hidden talent for winning over stubborn males." Daniel looked at her in a way that made Avery's stomach knot strangely. "Maybe you do." They spent the morning at the stables. Daniel taught her how to brush Maverick, how to check his hooves, how to talk to the animal using a calm tone of voice. And during all that time, something changed. The barriers began to crack. Conversations flowed more easily. Daniel told her that Maverick was the son of a racehorse and a work mare, a mixed breed nobody wanted, until he himself bought him at an auction. "Like you," Avery said without thinking. Daniel stopped, the brush suspended in the air. "Like me what?" "Mixed breed, between two worlds. Your father is a traditional politician. Your family has all this weight of image, but you were raised here on the ranch, working with the land. You don't fit completely into either side." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, and Avery thought she had gone too far. But then he went back to brushing Maverick. "You're more observant than I imagined. I have my moments." In the second week, Avery began working remotely from the ranch, connecting with the cooperative via laptop. Mason, the chief agronomist and Daniel's best friend, became a constant companion. He would show up at lunchtime, tell terrible jokes, tease Daniel shamelessly, and always got laughs from Avery. "You know he was different before, right?" Mason said one day as they had lunch on the back porch. "Different how?" "Lighter. Before taking over the company, before his father got into politics, Daniel liked to play guitar, fish in the river, barbecue with the employees." Mason took a sip of lemonade. "Then the family grew, money came, and with it came pressure. The weight of expectations." He closed himself off. Avery looked at where Daniel was talking with one of the veterinarians near the stables. "Can that be fixed?" "Everything can be fixed, Ave, but it takes patience, and someone who won't give up on him." At night, Avery discovered that Daniel played guitar. It was by chance, when she went downstairs to get water and heard soft chords coming from the library. She peeked through the half-open door and saw him sitting in a leather armchair, eyes closed, fingers sliding over the strings of a worn guitar. The music was melancholic, beautiful, and revealed a side of him Avery had never imagined existed. She didn't enter, just stayed there in the hallway, listening, and when he stopped playing, she silently returned to her room, carrying that secret like someone guarding a treasure. The first public event as a couple was a charity dinner in Oklahoma City, sponsored by an NGO that served underprivileged children. Avery was nervous, wearing a navy blue dress that Paula had chosen, her hair pulled into an elegant bun. Daniel appeared at her bedroom door, impeccable in a black tuxedo, and for the first time really looked at her. "You look beautiful." Avery felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you. You look presentable." He almost laughed. Almost. In the car, on the way to the event, Daniel explained the rules. "We're going to receive a lot of attention. Journalists, society columnists, politicians. They'll ask questions. They'll try to separate us in different conversations to see if our stories match. I know how to lie, Daniel. It's not about lying. It's about convincing." When they entered the event hall, hand in hand, flashes exploded like fireworks. Avery felt the firm grip of Daniel's hand, a gesture that seemed to say, "I'm here." And surprisingly, it calmed her. The dinner was a marathon of forced smiles, superficial conversations, and invasive questions disguised as kindness. "How did you meet? Was it love at first sight? When's the honeymoon?" Daniel answered with the ease of someone who had trained his whole life for that. Avery tried to keep up but was exhausted until Blair appeared, accompanied by an older businessman, all poisonous smiles. Avery, dear, what a dress. Interesting. Economy version of the collection, isn't it? Before Avery could respond, Daniel put his arm around her waist, pulling her against him. Actually, it was custom-made by a designer who doesn't accept clients who confuse class with price tags. But I imagine it's hard to understand the difference, Blair. His sister turned livid, the businessman next to her choked on his champagne, and Avery had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. Later, during the event's traditional waltz, Daniel guided her across the dance floor with a naturalness that surprised her. "You know how to dance," she observed. "Mandatory lessons in adolescence, courtesy of my mother. You must have hated it, hated every second." He spun her, pulling her back with a fluid movement that left her momentarily dizzy. "But now I'm grateful." "Why?" Daniel looked into her eyes, and Avery felt the air leave her lungs. There was something different there, something dangerous, something that wasn't in the contract, because it gives me an excuse to be close to you, without anyone questioning. Avery's heart raced. Was this part of the act? Or was there truth in those words? Before she could ask, the music ended, and they separated under polite applause, but the heat of his hand remained on her waist, and that look remained in her mind. On the way back to the ranch, inside the silent car, Avery finally asked, "Are you just fulfilling the contract, or—" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "Or what? Or has something changed?" He was silent for so long that Avery thought he wouldn't answer. But then, almost in a whisper, "I don't know, and that scares me." That night, Avery lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart still racing. They were just situation companions, just two strangers trapped in an agreement. But then why couldn't she stop thinking about him? Why did the sound of his guitar echo in her mind? Why did the touch of his hand on her waist still burn like an ember, knocking at the door? She got up, opening to find Daniel there, still in his tuxedo, but with his tie undone and an expression she had never seen before. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice hoarse. "And I should, but I can't." Avery felt the world stop. "Daniel, no, let me talk." He entered the room, closing the door. "When we signed that contract, I thought it would be easy. Share the same space, fulfill public obligations, and then move on. But you—" He ran his hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "You should have been so— you. Smart, funny, stubborn, real." Avery's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "And what do you want me to do with that information?" "I don't know. Maybe send me away. Maybe tell me I'm crazy. Or maybe—" He took a step forward, reducing the distance between them. "Maybe tell me I'm not the only one feeling this." Avery didn't think, didn't calculate. She just closed the space separating them and kissed him. It was different from the chaste kiss at the courthouse. It was hunger, desire, months of tension exploding all at once, his hands on her waist, pulling her against his hard body, her hands in his hair, feeling the softness of the strands, lips seeking each other urgently, tongues meeting in a dance as old as time. When they separated, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he murmured. "I know," Avery whispered. "And now?" "Now." She smiled, still dizzy. "Now we stop pretending." The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Avery and Daniel didn't announce anything, didn't make statements, but something had changed between them irreversibly. Looks lasted longer. Touches became constant and necessary. And the nights, well, the nights turned into whispered confessions in the dark, muffled laughter, and a connection that went far beyond the physical. But the world outside wasn't happy with the new dynamic of the Foster Morgan couple. Blair, noticing the growing closeness between them, intensified her sabotages. She published a series of social media stories, making veiled comments about certain people who don't know their place. She spread to socialite friends that Avery was probably pregnant, hence the rushed marriage. She even invited Ryan, Avery's ex-photographer affair, to an event at the ranch, without warning anyone. Avery. Ryan crossed the garden on a Saturday afternoon, camera hanging and that charming smile that once worked on her. What a surprise to find you here. It's not a surprise, Ryan. I live here, Avery replied without patience. Oh yes, of course. The whirlwind wedding. He approached. You didn't even tell me. I thought we were friends. We were. Until you made it clear you wanted more, and I made it clear I didn't. Across the garden, Daniel watched the scene with an expression Mason recognized immediately. Dude, you look like you're about to rip someone's head off. Who's that? Ryan Moore, photographer, fifth-rate Casanova, and apparently interested in your wife. Daniel's jaw tightened. Was he invited? By Blair. Clearly a setup. Daniel crossed the garden with long strides, arriving exactly when Ryan tried to touch Avery's arm. Darling, he said, his voice low but firm. I didn't know we were expecting visitors. Ryan instinctively stepped back. There was something about Daniel's presence that intimidated without needing words. I was just greeting Ave. We're old friends. Friends, Daniel repeated, putting his arm around Avery's waist and pulling her against him. How interesting. My wife didn't mention photographer friends who show up unannounced. Probably because they're not relevant, Avery completed, fitting against Daniel in a way that made clear where she belonged. Ryan got the message. Right. Well, good to see you, Ave. Congratulations on the marriage. And he left, tail between his legs. As soon as he disappeared from sight, Avery turned to Daniel. Jealous, Mr. Foster. Absolutely, Mrs. Foster. She smiled, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Good to know. But while small problems like Ryan were easily resolved, bigger storms were forming on the horizon. Alexander Foster, the senator, was increasingly worried about his son's excessive humanization. Daniel had begun questioning political decisions, investigating family contracts, asking uncomfortable questions, and all of this coincided with Avery's arrival. That girl is making you weak, Alexander said one day in the ranch office. You've always been focused, disciplined. Now you're walking around with that lovesick look, defending her family, questioning businesses that have always been profitable. Maybe because those businesses aren't as clean as you insist on believing, Dad. Alexander slammed the table. Be careful, Daniel. You may be CEO, but you're still my son. And this family didn't get where it is by being sentimental. No, it got here using shortcuts, political favors, and shady deals I'm discovering now. The silence that followed was cutting. What are you insinuating? I'm saying I found irregularities in the contracts for the construction where Carter had the accident. Shell companies, rigged bids, overcharging. And your name, Dad, is on documents linking all of this to a bigger scheme. Alexander paled. You have no proof of anything, not yet, but I will. The threat hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. And Alexander realized he had lost control over his son. So he decided to attack where it hurt most. Avery. The setup was cruel and calculated. Alexander paid a journalist known for sensational stories to publish a report insinuating that Avery had married Daniel for financial gain, that her family was involved in fraud at the cooperative where she worked, and that Carter's accident was intentional to extort the Fosters. The article came out on a Sunday morning and went viral within hours. Avery was having coffee when Daniel entered the kitchen, tablet in hand, and a somber expression. You need to see this. She read the article, then read it again, and then dropped the tablet on the table, her hands shaking. This is a lie. All lies. I know. My mother, my brother, they're going to see this. Everyone's going to see. They'll think we're criminals, gold diggers, that... Daniel held her face between his hands. Avery, look at me. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to deny it, Sue. Do whatever is necessary. Nobody talks about my family like that. Your family? She blinked, eyes brimming with tears. But they're not. They are. You are. Your mother is. Even that reckless brat of a brother of yours is. And nobody messes with my family. He kissed her. Firm, intense, and Avery felt that for the first time she wasn't alone in that fight. But the situation worsened when Chloe, Avery's best friend and lawyer, discovered that the journalist who published the article had received a suspicious payment from an account linked to one of Alexander's aides. "Avery, this was planted. Someone is trying to destroy you, to separate you from Daniel." "The senator," Avery murmured. "It has to be him." "Probably, but we need proof." The proof came from an unexpected source, Grandma Catherine, Daniel's grandmother, silently watching her grandson be manipulated by her son for years, finally decided to act. She sought out Avery one afternoon, handing her a box of old documents. "These are records I've kept over the years. Conversations I heard, papers Alexander thought were destroyed. Is not the man he pretends to be, and my grandson needs to know this." Avery and Daniel spent the entire night reviewing the documents, and what they found was worse than they imagined. Alexander was not only involved in corruption schemes, but had also orchestrated Carter's accident. The illegal race was organized by the senator's henchmen to create a situation where Daniel would need an arranged marriage that would strengthen the family's political image. Carter was manipulated, induced to participate by people paid to do so. "He used a 17-year-old boy as a chess piece," Avery whispered, disgusted. Daniel was pale. "My own father. He did this." The decision that followed was the hardest Daniel had ever made in his life: expose his father or protect the family. But with Avery by his side, her hand intertwined with his, the choice became clear. We do the right thing. And they did. They handed all the documents to the district attorney's office. Daniel gave a bombshell interview exposing the schemes. Alexander Foster, the powerful senator, was arrested in an operation that occupied the news for weeks. The family went into crisis. Helen locked herself in her room for days. Blair had a meltdown on social media, but Grandma Catherine, Mason, and surprisingly, some longtime ranch employees stood by Daniel. "You did the right thing, my grandson," Catherine said, squeezing his hand. "Honor can't be bought, and you just proved you have more of it than any Foster." While the world outside collapsed, Avery and Daniel found refuge in each other. On sleepless nights, he played guitar for her. On difficult mornings, she made that strong coffee he loved. They rode together at dawn, Avery finally learning to ride with Maverick, and slowly, amid the chaos, they built something real, something true, something that was never in any contract. The turning point happened on a rainy winter day. Avery was in the library, working on her laptop, when she felt sudden nausea. She ran to the bathroom, and there, after vomiting, she sat on the cold floor, her heart racing, a suspicion growing like a plant in fertile soil. 3 pharmacy tests later, the suspicion was confirmed. She was pregnant with Daniel's child, and that wasn't in any clause of any contract. When he arrived from the office that evening, Avery was waiting for him in the living room, her hands trembling. "We need to talk." Daniel sat down next to her, worried. "What is it? Another article?" "My father is—" "It's not about him, it's about us." She took a deep breath. Daniel, impregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stared at her, processing the words, and Avery saw all the emotions pass across his face. Shock, fear, and then, finally, something that made her want to cry with relief, joy. "You're sure?" 3 tests, all positive. He let out an incredulous laugh, running his hands through his hair. "A baby. We're going to have a baby. I know it wasn't in the plans, that the contract—" Daniel pulled her onto his lap, kissing her with an intensity that took her breath away. "To hell with the contract. I love you, Avery. I love you in a way that doesn't make sense, that isn't practical, that will probably drive me crazy, but it's real. And this baby—" He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "This baby is ours, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving him worthy of both of you." Tears streamed down Avery's face. "I love you too, so much it hurts." They stayed there, embraced, while the rain drummed against the windows and the future, once so uncertain, finally made sense. Epilogue. 2 years later. Foster Ranch was unrecognizable. Not physically, it was still the same imposing ranch house surrounded by green fields and the smell of damp earth. But the atmosphere was different. There was laughter in the hallways, live music on the porches, and the sound of little footsteps running through the gardens. Helen Foster, after her husband's arrest, spent months in therapy. Slowly, with the support of Grandma Catherine and, surprisingly, Avery, she began to rebuild a version of herself, less rigid, less concerned with appearances. She didn't transform into an affectionate grandmother overnight, but at least now she truly smiled when she saw her grandson playing. Blair, after the public meltdown, disappeared for a stint in Portugal. She returned 6 months later with shorter hair, less makeup, and a humility nobody thought she possessed. She apologized to Avery at an awkward but sincere lunch, admitting she had been cruel out of envy. "You got what I always wanted," she confessed. "True love, someone who looks at you like you're the whole world." The two didn't become best friends, but at least they stopped being enemies. Carter, Avery's brother, grew up. A lot. After witnessing the chaos his mistake caused, he enrolled in a community service program, helping young people avoid making the same mistakes he did. Daniel, in a gesture that surprised everyone, offered him an internship at Foster Exports. "If you're going to mess up, at least do it under my supervision," he said, but there was affection hidden under the rigid tone. Carter proved to be a dedicated employee, learning about the business with a seriousness that made Linda cry with pride. The company underwent a complete restructuring. Daniel cut ties with corrupt politicians, renegotiated contracts, implemented sustainable practices that transformed Foster Exports into a reference for social responsibility in agribusiness. It wasn't easy. He lost allies, faced boycotts, but in the end, honesty proved more profitable than shortcuts. And then there was Ethan Foster Morgan, the result of a marriage that began as strategy and ended as a love story. At 18 months, the boy had his father's dark, intense eyes and his mother's irreverent stubbornness. He ran around the ranch with Pepper, the little dog, who now had the company of a giant German shepherd named Thor. He learned to walk in the stables, gave carrots to Maverick with his little hands, and had a smile that melted even Grandma Helen's stone heart. "Daddy! Daddy!" Ethan ran toward Daniel, who had just arrived from the Oklahoma City offices. Daniel picked him up, spinning him in the air, while the boy giggled. "Hey, champ, did you take good care of Mommy for me?" "Yes, Mommy made cake." "She did?" Daniel looked at Avery, who came through the porch, drying her hands on a dish towel. She wore a simple cotton dress, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, and looked absolutely beautiful. "You made cake." "Tried to." Grandma Catherine supervised to make sure I didn't blow up the kitchen. Daniel laughed, kissing her quickly. "How was your day?" "Chaotic." Ethan decided today was interior designer day. He reorganized the living room, using pillows, books, and for some reason, potatoes. "Potatoes, don't ask. I don't understand either." He shook his head, smiling. That life, so different from the cold formality of years ago, was everything he didn't know he wanted. It was noise, mess, unpredictable. It was real. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Daniel took Avery to the back porch. There was a blanket spread on the floor, wine, cheeses, and a guitar leaning against the pillar. "What's this?" Avery asked, surprised. "A date. I realized I never had a real one with you. Everything was arranged: marriage, formal events, obligations. I want to do it right this time." She smiled, sitting down next to him. "We've been married for 2 years, have a son, and you want to have a first date now." "Exactly." He poured the wine, handing her a glass. Better late than never. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing, about plans to expand organic production on the ranch, about Avery's idea to open an accounting consultancy for small producers, about Ethan, who would probably be more stubborn than both of them combined, about the life they built, despite everything. "Do you regret it?" Daniel suddenly asked. "Accepting that contract?" Avery thought for a moment, looking at the stars above them. "No, because it brought me you. Brought Ethan, brought this crazy, wonderful life I never planned. And you? I regret not realizing sooner that you were exactly what I needed." He picked up the guitar, tuning the strings. "Remember I promised you a song?" "Promised?" "That night, when you peeked through the library door." Avery blushed. "You knew." "I always knew." He smiled, beginning to play, and then he sang. It wasn't a known song. It was his, for her, about contracts that became love, about arranged marriages that became destiny, about two stubborn people who needed chaos to find their way to each other. When he finished, Avery had tears streaming down her face. That was truth, pure truth. She leaned in, kissing him with all the love she felt, and Daniel returned it with the same intensity. There under the stars of Foster Ranch, surrounded by the sound of night and the certainty that they had found in each other the home they had always sought, they were simply Daniel and Avery. Not billionaire and intern, not Foster and Morgan, just two people who loved each other against all odds. And when they went back inside, hand in hand, Grandma Catherine watched them from the second-floor window, a satisfied smile on her lips. "I knew it," she murmured to no one in particular. "Always knew that idiotic contract would work out, because sometimes destiny needs an accident, an imaginary goat, an impossible contract, and a lot of stubbornness to bring together two souls born to find each other. And when they finally do, well, then there's no contract in the world that can define what they feel, because true love doesn't fit in clauses. It simply is. And Avery and Daniel, they simply were, together, forever. I hope you enjoyed this unlikely love story, full of twists, emotions, and that happy ending we all deserve. If you were moved by Avery and Daniel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give that special like, and hit the bell so you'll be helping other people just like you receive good stories like this one that warm the heart and make us believe that true love exists, even when it starts in the most unexpected places. Until the next story.